Well, to look at oil markets a bit more in depth, I'm joined by Alex Booth, Head of Research at Kepler. Alex, thank you so much for joining me in studio. As we've just heard, Omicron everywhere. What kind of impact is this going to have on the oil markets?
Hi, it's good to actually be here in person, as you say. I think the issue that we're facing with Omicron is that we're just in a position, certainly with OPEC coming up in the next few days, in a position where it's too soon to tell what the outcome is going to be. We've got another week at least, if not 2 weeks, before the vaccine makers are able to say with any degree of certainty what the impacts are going to be, what the efficacy of the vaccines are going to be. Yes, we've heard that Moderna are concerned about it. Astra have come out and said, we think that there is still going to be a strong impact from the vaccine, but they just don't know for sure. So if anything, we're going to see at least a pause in terms of the rebound in demand through into Christmas. The problem is that's going to be too late even in the run up to Christmas to see any return through December. So it's really going to be a case of a return to demand in January. If, unfortunately, the vaccines aren't as effective and there are real concerns there, you could see us essentially facing back to square one. The issue is that large swathes of the population globally just aren't going to stand up for that. So there are going to be real pushbacks in terms of any of the kind of severe restrictions in mobility and life as we are returning to normal, basically. Bottom line is everyone's in a very sticky situation. We're talking about what happens with OPEC in 1 month's time, more than 1 month's time, and they're just not quite prepared to go there yet.
Moving on to something a little bit more concrete now, something we know a bit more about. President Biden last week announced the release of the strategic oil reserves, 50 million barrels, but you say that this may be too little too late. Why is that?
Yeah, he essentially took a playbook from OPEC in that they were talking about the SPR release or the potential SPR release for a very long time before it actually happened. We've actually seen the drawdown of SPR in a steady way through the last few months, through this year as a whole anyway, in the US at least, and also in China. There have already been agreements to sell barrels to fund other investment projects, etc. You have to sell barrels to fund the maintenance of the reserves as well. So we've already seen this gradual drawdown so far. The issue is that the volumes that we're talking about are not just in the US, but in other consuming nations, be it China, India, others in Europe and so on. It equates to, over the course of the 6 months that we're discussing these drawdowns, it equates to about 540,000 barrels a day. The issue is that we're also talking about, with OPEC, Omicron aside, increasing supply by an additional 400,000 barrels a day incrementally every month for the next few months still anyway. So in comparison to that, the work done in terms of increasing supply to the market is really being done by OPEC, not by the drawdown in reserves. Ultimately, when it comes to, say, the US as well, those reserves need to be replaced. So you're putting oil back into the market in the next few months that just has to go back into storage later on next year. So it's not really fundamentally changing the situation. It's very good for optics, but from an actual physical barrel point of view, it really doesn't do much compared to OPEC supply increases.
And on the topic of OPEC, with the meeting this week, what are you looking out for? What do you think we can expect?
So we've already heard that Russia and the UAE are likely to push back against any pause in increasing. The fact that OPEC were cautious in their last meeting, despite pressure from oil-consuming nations to increase the supply, they stated at the time that it was still just too soon with regards to COVID to start pushing more and more product into the market. And actually that cautious decision has proven to be correct. Where it's not exactly hindsight, they were right to be concerned. I think, as I was saying, it's still too early to make a call in terms of what the impact of the latest variant is going to be. The OPEC are going to be meeting with imperfect information, unfortunately. The bottom line is we're talking about what's going to be happening with an increase potentially in January. I think they'll want to maintain the momentum in terms of keeping oil supply to the market until Friday, until the new variant news was announced. We were in a fundamentally tight market environment. We needed more oil. So I think we'll maintain that theme, basically. Yes, there are reasons why they might put things on pause, but they're more likely to keep it running on.
Certainly a lot to be looking out for in the next few weeks. Alex, thank you so much for joining me. That was Alex Booth, the head of research at Kepler. Well,